I'm not going to address either gossip or complaints or people who knew or weren't included or would do it a different way or who's shooting at whom. That Hamas, it's not Hamas. The real story here, the story is that aid and food is moving into Gaza. I find it difficult that there are people who would go on television shows to complain about a process that is working and moving food into the area.
Tammy,
will it improve over
please.
time? Would anything that we do improve over time? Yes, in all likelihood. And I think anyone would welcome someone like Mrs. McCain or anyone else who has a method within which to contribute to this effort to be able to do so instead of going on television and complaining.
Cindy McCain of the World Food Program was on CBS yesterday with a very different narrative. And we are hearing from the ground today from our reporters and producers and camera crews that this incident was very serious, that it was not Hamas related. Cindy McCain said that Hamas is not breaking up the food deliveries, that people are starving and there are food riots because people are desperate. And the criticism of the GHF has been that it is not independent or impartial, that it was started by the Netanyahu government with people who are supposedly independent, and that it is only operating in the South, deliberately designed with 4 distribution points in the South in order to have people in the North move south for the aid and therefore accelerate the movement of people and the putting people in the South rather than in the North where they wanted to be. So there are a lot of controversies about this from the ground,
yes.
from all of our reporting. McCain said that no one had approached the World Food Program, which is still delivering food into Gaza, that people have been desperate. No one had, she had met with, as you know, the secretary. She said she welcomed that, was grateful for it, that the Rubio and McCain families have been friends for decades, but that they had a frank conversation about what's happening between Israel and the food deliveries, and that no one had even told them about this foundation or given them.
Well, Andrea, this is where again there's certainly, and this is something the world is watching, something we've all cared about getting resolved. It is not an uncomplicated situation. This is, however, the first delivery of major aid, if not the only aid we've been hearing for months. I wish that Cindy McCain had spoken up, that they had found a way to move food into Gaza, because that certainly hadn't been conveyed to us. But now, which if that's the case, that's great. What I do know is that the people on the ground now, as the number I told you, I think is rather significant, 462,000 meals. You know, that's what we're focused on. And that this is, and I'm not going to address either gossip or complaints or people who knew or weren't included or would do it a different way or who's shooting at whom. That Hamas, it's not Hamas. The real story here, the story is that aid and food is moving into Gaza at a massive scale at this point, when you're looking at 8,000 food boxes. Was this going to be like going to the mall or through a drive-through? No, it wasn't. This is a complicated environment, and the story is the fact that it's working. I find it difficult that there are people who would go on television shows to complain about a process that is working and moving food into the area.
Tammy,
will it improve over
please.
time? Would anything that we do improve over time? Yes, in all likelihood. And I think anyone would welcome someone like Mrs. McCain or anyone else who has a method within which to contribute to this effort to be able to do so instead of going on television and complaining.
Tammy,
and that's
one follow-up, please.
the real story is that this is succeeding, and I think we should all at least have the courage to embrace that.
But until now, there has been a blockade by Israel of the food. So no one has been able to get through
Well, I
those
thought you just
processes.
said Cindy McCain said that she was able to do that, but I would also say that this process managed to overcome that dynamic, and the dynamic has changed. Whatever it was that was hindering the nature of aid to the Gazan people has been overcome. It clearly needs to expand. I don't speak for this foundation, but clearly we've got to welcome any dynamic that allows getting aid and food into the region, which is happening right now, and that's the story. Nadia.
Thank you, Tammy. Two questions. I understand this is the beginning of a process. For the time being, the delivery of food is at two places, which is Tal Sultan and the Murag crossing. Is this any guarantee that people who come from the north to receive this food, are they allowed to go back? Because that's the fear, that basically this is a way to move the population from the north to the south. Mm-hmm. And do you have any plan that they will expand it to go to other places?
Well, it's
in the
not,
north?
this is not a State Department effort. We don't have a plan. I can't answer that regarding the nature of how certain situations would be responded to. I'm not going to speculate or say what they should or should not do. The Gaza Humanitarian Foundation has an email. They should be reached out to, and that's what I'd recommend regarding plans to expand, plans to make assessments of what's worked and what hasn't at this point, and what changes they might make, and what the goal is. Clearly, the goal is to reach as many people as possible. Yes, sir. Yeah. Go ahead, please.
The Israeli Minister of Strategic Affairs is in town, according to Israeli media. Has there been any meeting between him and Secretary Rubio? And can you update us on the state of talks between Iran and the U.S.? Is there a new meeting planned ahead?
Well, I will not discuss, as you might imagine, any meetings or conversations the Secretary is having that are not public or may not be happening. Regarding the latest rounds of talks regarding Iran, we can tell you that Senior Advisor and Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, of course, and Policy Planning Director Michael Anton participated in a fifth round of talks with Iran on Friday, May 23rd in Rome. The discussions were both direct and indirect and lasted over 2 hours. The talks continue to be constructive. That's not something that we've been able to say that in these particular talks, which is beneficial, and in this case they were constructive as well, and we made further progress. Both sides have agreed to meet again in the near future, and we are grateful to, once again, our Omani partners for their continued facilitation of the process. All right? Yes, dear.
Just to follow up on the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation,
sure.
I think you talked about independence and neutrality that was involved in this new foundation, but I mean, quite clearly that's not the case. I mean, the IDF itself has said this has been done in coordination with it and the foundation, so it's clearly being done, and the security of it is carried out by, on the perimeter, Israeli forces and then American security contractors. The problem with that, and what all the experts in the United Nations say, is that you therefore have a situation where the aid is provided by an organisation that seems to be a party to the conflict, and that's what the UN has always avoided, because you potentially made the recipients targets, and we're seeing that already, potentially, in that this has become a very militarised form of aid. So I'm just interested in why you describe this as independent and neutral when it clearly doesn't appear to be so.
Well, again, I don't speak for this foundation. What I can tell you is the description of the nature of what they're accomplishing, which is getting food and aid into that region. I'll say that just one more time. There are some disagreements about how that's being handled, how that's being implemented. But I think that most of us would agree that this is good news, that it, in any other mechanism, under any other expectation, was not able to accomplish this. So it's
just that there was another mechanism that was able to accomplish this and more.
Well, you know, you're right. We did have a really good mechanism. It was called a ceasefire, which Hamas broke. And it is a ceasefire and a plan that had been operating and offered, which they continually refused to accept, continued to hold hostages, as they still continued to not just hold hostages, but the bodies of the people that they've murdered. And they've refused to do the one thing that could stop this in a moment. They've refused. So we did. It was a ceasefire, and Special Envoy Witkoff, very successful, and Hamas decided, well, that was just too much of that. So the real story here is that there's food aid going in. There will be people, of course, who will look at some of the details and not like it. But then I think it shows us the priorities of certain individuals when it comes to, at first it was, let's get these people fed, and now it's seems to be something else in the meantime.